So just briefly, my name is George Pimenta. I'm a project manager at IPN. I will further discuss my background and my experience. I would just like for everyone, if you can, to just unmute yourself and do just like a one sentence description of what you do, what's your main interest in this workshop, and any word that you can add, so I can better address your needs. I don't know. We can start from the top. Francesca Morelli, I see here. Or if you don't want to share, it's okay. I would really like to just get a sense of.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay. I am the project manager of cherry chip infrastructure. That is the Italian node of the Instatic infrastructure, and also we are involved in computational and informatics, some research group. Me personally, I am a project manager, and also I take care a bit of the technology transfer activity. So I was interested to, let's say, understand.
Okay.
It's quite difficult. I mean, I'm involved in several activities for engaging also the industry sector, and quite difficult. So anything is good for me.
Okay, if anyone wants to take the lead, just a quick, I don't know. I'll ask maybe the ladies first. Chiara, I don't know if it's a lady's name, Chiara Pasquale. Maybe not.
Hello. Yeah. So sorry, I was on mute.
No problem.
What is the question? So,
no, just a quick background and your expectation.
Okay. So I am Chiara Pasquale. I am working on innovation and the innovation management for 15 years. And now I created my company, a platform to matchmake academics with startups and corporates.
Okay, great.
To help the tech transfer offices to organize the collaborations effectively, via online.
Right, just
to connect, to connect more, to open the network, to connect with other companies and discuss with them and to manage the collaboration.
Okay, great stuff. I don't know if anyone wants to share. So we have two different profiles here, so that's quite interesting.
Maybe, I mean, this is Antonio Scarmeta. Maybe just to be the next one here. I'm basically innovation manager, basically on the company. It's a spin-off company of the University of Murcia, in that sense. So in Spain, so we have a spin-off that is called Odins, that basically is focused on IoT and smart infrastructures. And basically, our main interest here is a little bit to understand better, because I mean, we are more on the academic side. And like on many spin-offs, so we need to understand a little bit better how to make business of all these the issues in the sector. So we have already some business ongoing, but I mean, basically, we want to have this acquire new expertise on this area.
Okay, great stuff. If anyone else wants to join, just unmute. During the presentation, if you want to ask a question, please just unmute. It's free. I want to make it dynamic.
Jorge, I would like to add one thing.
Yeah.
Like I just finished a book about innovation and collaboration in the digital era.
Yeah.
And I have a chapter of cost of knowledge about, like sometimes companies, they have this problem to realize like knowledge is not for free. If you if you work with academia, so that you have to pay them. So so I created some models for this. Yeah.
Okay, I will go forward, then in the end maybe we can reopen for discussion. So I see there are different profiles, and I think it's I think we can move in the direction that all of you will probably get a sense. Yeah, finally it's working, my presentation. So yeah, so this is me. I'm a project manager in IPN. So actually, what I do is mainly to support IT-based companies. So we as an incubator, we only support tech-based companies. So we don't support, like, let's say, social innovation on other sort of companies. My personal experience has been one of a lot of corporate experience, but also I founded 2 startups in the past, so I know the pains and also the joys of starting a company. So this is mostly what I do. Face-to-face interaction, it's so much better, but in these digital times we have to to resort to this digital resources, which also enable us to maybe even reach even further as we would do in physical setups. So what is IPN? Just a brief note. So IPN actually is a very curious model of institution. So we were founded by the University of Coimbra. So within, let's say, the value chain, we are actually in the middle between universities and companies and the production sector, let's say. So as a non-profit association, we are, as an institution, we are a non-profit association. Our main goal is to promote innovation and actually establish this links between the scientific environment, the scientific knowledge, and the applied knowledge in companies. So we are an association. We bring together a lot of associates right now. So not just university, private companies, public authorities, and so on. So it's a quite diverse association, which is also very interesting regarding this tech transfer environment. So how do we do it? We have 3 main areas. Or on one hand, we have a set of applied labs that only work on R&D, but applied R&D. Okay, we don't do fundamental research that comes from the university. We only do applied research with companies and for companies. Then we have a business incubator, which is probably why IPN is better known across Europe. We are a successful incubator. We have won several awards, and most of our startups have managed to be successful. Some have not, but that's just the case. And then we work a little bit on training. So our model is actually quite unique. So because we have a set of technical staff, we actually do work directly with technology development. So we help companies to further develop their concepts, their technology, and this is done in six areas. They are on the right. It's not for the matter, it's not such important to detail them, but it's quite diverse, ranging from IT to automation to materials, so all sorts of different technology areas. Regarding the incubator, it's pretty much a standard operation. We host tech-based companies up to 4 years after the creation. This is our achievement since '96, which was the year where we started the incubation. So we have helped to create over 300 companies, and most of them came from an academic background, and so they have encountered this problem of the tech transfer, how to deal with IP and so on. So this is our one of our interesting projects. We do work with the European Space Agency as a BIC, which is a business incubation center. So we run a lot of activities with ESA in Portugal, supporting startups and scale-up companies. Regarding the scale-up companies, we also have an acceleration program, which actually it's not a short-lived program like some others that you might know. It's a program that lets companies to stay with us up to 6 years, so they can be 4 years in the incubator and up to 6 years in the accelerator. So they have a wide period of time to expand and to grow their activities and get bigger and more mature. So this is our main focus with these companies, to keep on providing them R&D service to grow their R&D intensity, let's say, and also bring them to international level as a strong scale-up. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to just overview a little bit on what's this tech transfer concept all about, some good practice and examples, and then some strategy more on the startup side, as we have just discussed it here with some of you. And I think that will cover briefly, of course, some topics, and I will happy to discuss any particular topic that you would like to address. Of course, all the material will be available for all of you. So what's the setup of the technology transfer office is why was this done, and how can this be set up in different institutions? So generally, tech transfer offices, they want to bridge this gap that exists between science and the market, which is actually what we in IPN are doing. Although we are not set up as a tech transfer office, there is one so in the university. They typically you find them in universities, in R&D centers. So this is the usual setup, and they have a broad scope of activities, and I believe that the strongest ones are actually quite large in what they do. Of course, nothing is possible without specialized staff. So it has been, especially across Europe, I think TTOs have evolved a lot, and there are excellent examples. And of course, when you look at a university or an R&D center that has this sort of tech transfer policies well defined and well applied, normally you have very excellent technical staff with it, and we're going to discuss that briefly. So one of the things that I assume when looking at one TTO is how well structured are they within the institution where they are hosted. So if one is actually more dedicated to just a faculty or just a subsector of another department, it tends to have not to be so effective and having not as much power as they should have. So reporting directly to the top management is crucial, and it's a good policy to be independent of other operation areas, and having a direct report to the board, or the directory, if it's a case of the university, is fundamental to have a good operating one. Of course, one of the main activities that I find crucial in TTOs, it's not on only managing, let's say, the daily activities of IP protection, of setting up regulation within the internal regulation of the institution. Actually, is to raise awareness and train entrepreneurs, researchers on the tech transfer activities and policies. Because most of the time, what we find in, for instance, in startups, is actually the lack of knowledge leads to many either mistakes or sometimes business opportunities being lost out of the not enough knowledge about what are the current practices, what are the best policies, what can one do with the asset that it has on hands. So it's really important that this the staff of the TTOs are able not only to work on the technical aspects, but also can be somewhat having some training competencies and being able to educate researchers and entrepreneurs on this. This is crucial, and if it's the case when you are setting up a new one or trying to change one of your activities, I would strongly advise you on having this as this sort of workshops, more detailed workshops. There are several activities you can run. Of course, this implies that one has cross competencies, of course. Legal and IP are core, but many others are necessary, as one will see across the presentation. So it's not easy to find a way to picture this, but I think this image not being perfect helps us understand where TTOs stand, and of course the activities can span from the early days of fundamental research to the product being on the market. So it's important that one understands that it's not just a one-step process, but it's a complete one. And that comes from having such a variety of activities that are both complementary and are, I would say, fundamental to for instance, when we're addressing startups and how to engage in this IP world, which sometimes for entrepreneurs it's quite challenging. When we're let's say addressing the fundamental science, researchers tend to have a more stricter approach, as when you're looking for the market side, people are looking for, let's say, business opportunities. How can I take advantage of my assets? So it's interesting that being in the middle, one has to understand both the university and the inventor side, but also the application side. So this is quite important when you are setting up the TTOs. I'm not sure if I should go a little bit further on this, but regarding the tools that a TTO should have, and this can be either in a university as an applied R&D center as we have here. Of course, these are the let's say the fundamental tools where one needs to work with. Besides having an internal regulation that regulates the relation between individual staff and the institution, which has to be clear, it has to be well known by everyone, and it's let's say the backbone of all the policy, and this has to be in place. It has to be known by people that either already work or start working there. Of course, there are a couple of working forms then that you should prepare and have and make available for your staff. The invention disclosure form, how do you assess, let's say, a new invention? Then the classical NDAs, which we can also discuss, because there are many templates which you can use, and then other more practical documents that one institution might use, as the R&D consortium agreement. So when you have more than one institution working on a single development, or contract research, which is when you are hired to do a specific research. So these are let's say the fundamentals that one should have at your disposal when you're addressing a TTO. So if you are on, let's say, Francesca role, one has to have it all prepared and to different settings. And when you're in your, let's say, entrepreneurial or research role, understanding what are these policies and these regulations, and how they impact your activity. I don't know if you want to add any comment or question. Please do if I'm not being as clear as I intend. One extra thing that maybe for the ones who have this actual TTO role in hand, is really important that you create case studies and success stories that illustrate what you do, how important it is, and the impact that it has on the market. And this can be from how many patents and a specific patent that you were granted. It can be a spin-off company and how they IP play the role in their, let's say, market relevance, on how it was important for their commercialization strategies. So having a set of case studies, well documented, well prepared, I think it's a wonderful tool, and shows right away to either researchers, entrepreneurs, other stakeholders that come across your institution that you are a knowledgeable institution, that you have a current set of policies, and you can be trusted and therefore be more interesting to work with. So this is one first, let's say, tip that I don't see in many institutions, and I think it helps a lot for you to also disclose how professional you are in these activities. I don't know if you have any questions about the specificities of setting up a TTO, or if you want to discuss any question on this. If so, please raise your mic and we can proceed. Of course, how can one see the impact or the effectiveness of having this such policy? So you can have different exploitation paths of any asset that you come across in your institution, and there are a number of ways where you can, of course, license it or operate under it. Okay, so this would be the main possible exploitation paths that you can have, you can define, and you can prepare yourself to. Okay, given that if you have that rule. So first of all, some contractual exploitation, some direct exploitation, or spin-off creation, which I think some of you also have the example. So what can you do when you have a contractual exploitation? Okay, so you can set up different set of contracts, different set of paths. On one, you can grant IP rights to another company or another counterpart. This can be also another R&D institutions. Of course, one can understand this as a contract research where you can set up an upfront payment and then have royalties on top of this contract. What's the advantage of setting up royalties? What's the disadvantage? So when royalties, and I do believe that you all understand the concept of royalties, they determine a long-term relationship with the company or the other institution you're partnering up with. So although it seems interesting when you have the asset and you want to exploit it, it might not be so interesting when you are acquiring that right. So royalties, of course, are one of the themes I would like to then further discuss in the setup of the strategies, but they are right away one of the topics I would like to take caution with. Then, of course, you can have either partnership or consortiums and co-ownership, for instance, of IP rights, and this is quite common. Some companies do prefer to continue with the co-ownership and divide the asset rights, which is also possible. And this can be the case that when you're negotiating, you should not, let's say, upfront just offer one option to the counterpart. So a lot of options do set up on the table. Of course, this is having a direct exploitation is another way to let's say out-license your IP, and it's quite straightforward. Or of course you can promote the spin-off creation, which is very popular and let's say one of the chosen options among, for instance, universities. When setting up a spin-off policy, this can be part, of course, of your IP regulation. One has to understand that when the promoter or the inventor wants to go forward with the commercial exploitation of a patent or any other right, then this becomes I would say an umbilical relation, right? Although spinning off the concept itself means that you're parting from the larger institution to an outside institution, which for commercial purpose, for operational purposes, brings a lot of advantage for the new entity. In a sense, universities do prefer this as a way to keep umbilical cord direct to these institutions, but also for instance, a new company that is formed. When you appear as a new entity, as a new company, you don't come out of the blue, let's say, and you are directly tied to a larger institution. This is also a big advantage. What is the what can be the issues one can have with this? Of course, the first consideration is the how long and this exclusive exploitation, how long should it be? And when you create a new startup, it's hardly the case to do an upfront payment. So how do you put a price and a long-term price on the exploitation rights that the spin-off has is one of the golden rules, let's say, of the spin-off creation policy. I am a personal advocate for spin-offs. Of course, I am supporting startups, so this would be the case for me as my profession. Of course, some universities and some institutions can be a little bit stricter on these policies because, of course, the risk of granting an exclusive exploitation right to a new entity, to a new company that doesn't have any track record, holds risk. So compared to having a deal with a more established company, there's a trade-off that has to be considered. Within universities, I believe that granting this to the promoter, to the inventor, comes out of building this umbilical and stronger relation, but one has to consider what are the long-term effects of this. Of course, yeah, I think there's some question coming up. I'm sorry, I think
Hi, Jorge.
Yes?
I am Jara Pascual. I have a question here.
Of course.
Well, two questions. One is if here in this case of a spin-off, the university can have as well part of the IP to continue to research this area, you know, not to prevent the research stops because there is a spin-off.
Yes.
The other question is how legally we can ensure like the ethical emission of this research result will be the mission in a long term of the spin-off, because sometimes in these cases, I don't know, in 5 years, some investors buy out the spin-off, and then they close down the business. You know, to avoid the competition on the market, or you know, or they have misused their research results. So how you are dealing from tech transfer office to prevent, you know, this misuse unethically of the result of the research, and how you allowed at the same time always the university to follow the research after the spin-off. Yeah.
So in this case, and I must maybe just start with a clarification, because as IPN we don't have tech transfer office obligations over the university. Okay, I only deal with TTO as a acquirer, let's say. Okay, but of course, what can you do in the contract? That's, I think, your question. Yeah. First, you have to define clearly that these exclusive rights are being given with certain terms, right? First, for instance, if the spin-off is either acquired, sold by, etc., okay, that has to be a renegotiation of the rights. Either they go back to the university. So you can have reverse clauses that can cover this. Of course, the ethical use, which was something that you addressed. I'm imagining this, let's say, in biotech and some
well, and as well in not biotech, I have examples which I was super surprised, because then it's preventing the academics to collaborate again with corporates, you know.
Now, the thing is, of course, and going back, sorry, one thing that you mentioned and rightly mentioned is the right to continue the research.
Yeah.
Okay, and that has to be also addressed in the contract. Okay, and normally that's the case. There are a lot of examples where that has been used, and it's not an issue. I think the other issue is much more difficult to write in contract terms. Okay. Nevertheless, one can define in the object of the contract that the exclusive exploitation rights will be considered for this specific uses. Okay, and of course, when you set up these contracts, the clauses have to include the right for the university, in this case, to have a follow-on on the activities. Okay, and that is where the most problems, I must say, occur, right? Because those problems that you mentioned are one part, but for instance, when you have royalties that are defined under, let's say, specific sales, that tends to be very hard to follow up. Okay, and so I don't have many examples of the ethical clauses. We can then further discuss that. But I have some more examples or how not to set up, let's say, this follow-up clauses on how do you define the royalty, right? Because some cases it's really easy for the new company or the startup to just let's say mix the technology that they are using within other products, and then you lose trace of the use, and that's
the value. Yeah,
yes,
like what exactly coming the value from this piece of software coming from university, and which one you cook is another piece. Yeah.
Yes. So it's tricky in a sense, but it's doable as one thing that comes out of the creating the spin-off policy is mutual trust, of course, between researchers, academic, and their alma mater university. And if that is the case, no matter if the clauses are more on the grayer side, is doable. If not, of course, we always, and especially the case that you mentioned, software is really hard to follow up. That's my unfortunate take on the contracts.
Yeah, I remember we did one contract once. It was we put in the annex the whole lines of code.
which is yeah. So the description of the actual right of the actual thing is very important. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
but it's a very good question. And then on the other hand, for the startup founders that are in the call, one should also clearly define where the border ends, right? Because if you actually do exam work and work on top of the IP that you generated, of course that has to be clear, and yeah, again, it has to be written, it has to be clear, and that has to be a huge amount of trust between institutions, either companies, startups, or universities. Okay, thank you, Yara, for the question. Let me just, yeah. So when I was asked to do this workshop, this for me is probably the most important topics. Of course, if you are on the university side, I do believe that universities and R&D centers have even a social impact when fostering the startups to appear and to spin out, which creates so many examples of innovation across the world. And this is the case where not only one has to understand Yara's comments, but of course I think in the long term universities can benefit a lot if these startups are successful, and if they share, of course, part of the success, which is has to be just and in a sense very well defined. IP strategy for startups is a theme that most founders don't take care in the early days of the company. They normally are very focused on product development, on team development, and sometimes miss what can be the important IP steps that will grant them very important future revenues and sometimes just the future of the company. And so this is mostly a part of the workshop where we can discuss why is this so important for you from day one, okay, and how can you put that in motion. Okay, this is just the four, let's say, the four topics I want to cover. Just a brief overview: what are the IP rights, how to deal with this, how can this be part of your strategy, and how can you then enforce this, and just examples that you can use. Okay, of course, first of all, like when Yara asked me the question, we could be addressing so many things, right? We can be addressing a piece of software code, very long or very short or very important. We can be talking about technical developers. We can be talking about designs. So, of course, the wide range of IP rights are so I'm missing the word in English, are so broad that one has to first clearly define how can you first define it. And I think this is the easiest way. This is at least in European terms. So you have industrial property rights on one side, and we have copyrights on the other. And they address two big, let's say, groups that are I think quite understandable in a sense. And of course, in IP rights, you have patents, utility models, trademarks, design, and then on copyrights, you have the classical author rights, related rights, and software and database protection, which are the most well known. When we're addressing, and I'm just doing this overview so that some of you then, if you have some doubts, can take some notes or ask some questions. So when you're talking about, let's say, the technical features of the asset, we're always talking about patents and utility models. So patents are more well known than the utility models, but it's clear that you're focusing on some technical performance feature that your asset has. But of course, there are other rights. So how you distinguish one asset from another. Trademarks, other distinctive signs, they're also very important. And of course, when you're addressing the external appearance of an object, of anything, let's say, you have the design rights. And why are these important to state? Because of course you have, they grant you different rights, different scopes, and of course different durations. And this comes into play when one needs to set up very strict but also agile procedures, because in one case, and the most known case, and the patent, you have a time span of 20 years, which can seem very long, but also can be very short when you want to do some commercial exploitation. Of course, the trademark, they cover rights over signs, over visual or I'm missing the English word again. I'm sorry. And they of course are indefinitely renewable. They have a 10-year duration, but of course you have to renew them. I will not address patents as a whole right now. I can go back to that. But of course, trademarks are probably one of the easiest ones to register, but one has to be aware that one has to be available, and the likelihood of confusion with other already registered sign. And there are many examples of brands and signs that were not granted, and that generate a lot of confusion. Of course, the designs, the design, they cover statistical characteristics of goods. For instance, they can be registered during 25 years, five times periods of 5 years, and of course copyright, which is quite interesting, because one huge difference between copyrights is that you don't have to formally apply like you have to do for a patent, but nevertheless it covers works, like of course books, works of art, but also covers softwares and databases, and this is very important to many companies. Of course, when you're looking for a specific object, and we have here a very well-known phone, many protections cover this particular object. Of course, you have patents that can cover, for instance, the touch screen or any other technologies within the phone. Then you have the design protections of the whole object as a unique object. But just on the phone itself, you have different apps that are protected by copyright that cannot be forgotten. Of course, the own software, the running software of the device, and in the end, some very well-known trademarks that this phone has, and that you can see across this object or many others. Simpler objects have, then again, they seem very trivial, but they can include and they can hold different sorts of protection. So IP is actually much larger than sometimes one thinks of just pure patents, or it's actually very interesting when you think business-wise of this. So what can be the, let's say, I try to do the typical roadmap that one can think of when addressing this issue. It's of course long, but I don't know any business process that isn't long. And being an entrepreneur, or having being a head of any startup department, whatever, one has to consider if when going forward in these decisions, what is ahead and what you need to address. So prior arts, I think some of you are very familiar with this concept of prior art search. So it's, in a sense, it's just understanding what is already being published and registered as not only known scientific facts, but of course technological developments that have been protected. And this is the SpaceNet. I hope I'm pretty sure that Yara and Francesca at least know it very well. But I see many entrepreneurs and researchers and even people working in innovation that don't use it probably as often as they should. And this is just a simple case that when you come across potential new technology, just understanding that if that has been already first invented, discovered, or developed and registered. Part of the R&D efforts, and this is I'm not going to state an official source on this. Over a quarter of all R&D efforts are redundant, and this is huge as a societal impact, but even as a company, you're wasting 25% or 20% even of your resources trying to develop something that has been already protected by someone else. It's just a pure waste of not only time but resources. It's very interesting that you keep a close eye on your area of research, and this is done, of course, by searching by specific keywords, by specific topics that you are addressing. And assessing this is a very interesting way of first understanding how cutting edge your work or your product might be, but at the same time you keep a close eye on your competition, and this is crucial when you are launching your startup, the ones that are doing this, because all of a sudden your perception of competition might be quite different than what it is in reality. So this is of course not a daily routine that you should have at 9 o'clock in the morning, but it's a routine that you should have very well settled within your organization. Of course, the larger it is a company, the more people have dedicated to R&D, the easier it is to set it up. When you are starting a spin-off with just a few founders, 4, 5, 6, 10, nevertheless, this is something that is overlooked, that sometimes it's static, right? You do an initial search when you start the company or when you were developing the early days, and then it's you leave it sitting there for 6 or 12 months, and all of a sudden you were overtaken. And of course, the prior art search is also quite important to understand if you're not actually doing something wrong and infringe someone else's IP. This has been the case for many companies that I came across, and be aware. One good thing that you learn from reading other, for instance, patent applications is having a more closer look on how good patents are written. Okay, so in a sense, if you understand how novel your concept is, how innovative it is, if it fits all the criteria and what you want to go forward with a patent application, reading other patents within your given research area gives you important clues on how can you actually protect and defend what's your novelty. So this is something, of course, SPASNet is open database of millions of documents, so it's quite interesting to work with and easy. You don't have to be an IP expert to at least grasp the initial patent search. It's something that I think it can be very well, it can be very useful when you do it in, let's say, team mode, okay? With startups, it's actually one of the initial steps that I, as a project manager, engage with them. So understanding what is out there in their field is very interesting. You get a lot of information, not only technical information, but who are the main inventors that are publishing in this area? Where do they come from? Companies from Eastern Europe, from Western Europe, from Asia, so a lot of information comes from these searches that sometimes startups overlook, and this is the case where you should have this very, very well prepared. Of course, the IPO and your National Patent Office, if they have further services on this, they are of course welcome, but a simple guided search can be very useful. I have many examples of inventors that come to incubators and come to us just saying, okay, this is a totally new concept I've developed, and you search exactly the terms that they use, and on the first page you get 3, 4, 5 patents that cover exactly what he has designed. And this is, for me, sometimes just mind-blowing. How can one be working on a specific topic and never had the curiosity of searching? Because of course you can be a researcher and have some knowledge on scientific publications, on the, let's say, the frontier of knowledge, how it has been developed. But then one other thing is understanding on the commercial side, on the patent side, one has been defending that knowledge. So this is something that, for instance, when setting up the TTOs, having a basic workshop on how to search for patents, okay, on how to analyze each patent application, what is defended, what covers, what's the geography it's protected with, how many years they still have under their right, and so on and so forth. So this is something that I would strongly advise you, either as a TTO responsible, or as a company or R&D center responsible. So of course,
sorry, just a question, Jorge, just not to jump to the other. I mean, one of them, specifically in the area of ICT, I would say that one of the main problems regarding the patent, at least, and you know that depending on the country, but mostly in Europe, there's some kind of innovation, mostly linked to the design of the solution, that are difficult to be patented in some sense. No? It's totally different than if you go to United States, where basically, I mean, it's more easy in that sense. So what is the strategy there? I mean, from at least, I mean, from the, I mean, we already have that issue a couple of times, at least in our company, to try to define the borderline, no? Between what can be patent and what can be either, I mean, just as one of the hard I was just mentioning, just to put it in the list of the code and say, okay, this is what we already available. I don't know.
Yes, so of course in ICT, there's an extra challenge, right? Because you don't patent the code itself, right? Of course, you can have copyrights on it, which is a totally different issue. The border between having a right or being on top of someone else's right and be an infringement can be thin, okay? In these cases, this patent search might not be the number one source for knowledge, okay? Of course, you can consider also like a trade secret strategy, right? Which you choose not to patent, not to register, and keep it under secret. The problem is of course understanding where are the borders. I strongly, in this case, you really need to be helped. You need to have some experts on the matter, on the specific, because I cannot give you a generic advice on your specific case. I don't know which kind of ICT or software are you developing, okay? But of course, having it, there are many ways. I'm just going to explain ahead. Other ways where you can defend your novelty, okay? And that can be, for instance, just the branding of the solution. There are other ways you can choose. Of course, on the more technical side, it has to be looked through other eyes. Of course, this search will not give you all the answers, okay? It can give you, if you are if your code is being at least integrated in other systems, sometimes you can find some solutions better, and that can be one. So the effect that your software will do on a machine, I don't know. Can you just give me a hint on what you do?
No, yeah, no. I mean, it's for example, in this case, what you are saying. I mean, I mean, we are. I mean, in some cases we have different solutions, but specifically in one of the issues that we are developing a specific code for in the area of IoT. No, so basically, there's some kind of control system based on the integration of different kind of sensors and how they can be collaborating in order to solve a more general problem. No? So okay. The point is there is that as you are saying, it's in some cases it is a matter of it's software in some sense, but also in some case a procedure to try to solve a problem in that sense. So it is. We have tried, I mean, in order to create, because the procedures in that sense that are not necessarily software code, but is the procedure is something that has some way to be patented. Is that? But you need to have a very borderline there, very clear line about how to.
Again,
my main point is that Europe, in that sense, is quite in disadvantage over every area of the world, because you go to United States. I mean, we already have sell a patent in United States that's basically software, and they pay for it. I mean, and it was software, pure software.
That is a discussion I cannot bring here. We don't have the time for it. But of course, it's a very relevant discussion. The fact that in the US you have a different policy regarding that. Of course, when you're talking about sensors and actuator and how you can generate a certain effect, okay, that is different than just the software itself. So again, probably you'll have to move towards that, and not only the protection of the code itself, which you cannot in the patent application. Yeah, but again,
I can maybe have one of my cases.
Yes.
I did 2 patents, co-creation, I think 2008, and it was something about more technically. So when you have a technical solution, very specific technical solution, is this what you can patent, but it has to be super specific.
Yes.
And the software and everything, I think it's more like go to market and get customers.
Yes. So you go via the secret approach, let's say. So you hold it, but it's it's not easy. Again, if you have a very concrete technical development, but it has to be quite specific, not generic. Again, that's probably one of the things. And just going back to how important it is, because of course one of the things that kills most patent application is one of the criteria is of course the novelty. How it has to be a novel concept, a new concept. So I would say, in going back to the TTO the IP regulations, one of the main topics should be how should you disclose this, okay, and how important it is that the TTO has an effectiveness as an effective actuation procedures, especially regarding researchers. But because of course you know that if one publicly discloses the novelty, it no longer has an effect, and you cannot patent it. So the disclosure are really an important subject, and if one works very closely with inventors, with researchers, you are constantly reminding them of this, and sometimes goodwill and the eagerness of publishing by some scholars and some academics blows some novelties away. And this is something that has to be really embedded in one's mind and in one's procedure, especially in the university case, and even in companies case. You have to be clearly defining that the prior assessment of any new project needs to be done by either the IP responsible on the company or the TTO. So this is something that has to be written 100 times sometimes. And one of the things that I think it's actually quite basic is the fact that you should have confidentiality agreements with any third parties working with you. And this is sometimes so forgotten that I'm actually blown away by some procedures that I see across startups, that of course, in order to make it faster, you just you just go to a meeting and you show, and nowadays anyone can take a picture, and so don't be shy on setting up NDA and non-disclosure agreements. Being said, what they, of course, how can we enforce them is another question, but if one has this sort of policy, you straight away, as a third party, you understand how strongly you act on this. Okay, so as a matter of preventive action, this is for me critical. In startups, in particular, I see this happening all the time. The lack of NDAs. Sometimes you sign one, of course, with a VC, but even with the VC, one should look at the NDA they're sending you with very close eyes. I've seen non-disclosure agreements that that look like almost the Bible. And in one hand, I actually believe that the best template is actually a very simple and straightforward one that defines when was the meeting, who was in the meeting, what's the object of the meeting, and what is agreed upon the non-disclosure clause. So this is actually quite simple to set up, and it has to be on the straightaway folder that you use every day. Yes.
Yeah, I have. That is a. Oh my God, that's a so critical topic, Jorge. You are bringing, because some business angels, investors, they don't want to sign an NDA, and when they are doing this pitching, we are super cool, VC, blah blah blah. Always they say, please don't bother us with signing NDAs.
Yes.
And this is then one thing I think is from this kind of experience is like, then they are not professional, you know?
Yeah, this is my take.
Yeah.
This is my take. Of course, what's my personal experience with that? Of course, and let's put ourselves in the, let's say, for instance, an investor role, which is part of your job is to constantly assess new companies, new spin-offs, or whatever. Of course, if one considers, okay, I have to look at every NDA that I have to sign an NDA for every company that I look, and maybe I look at 10, 15 companies per day. Okay, it's a lot of work. But on the other hand, I also have to consider that, okay, if I'm a startup, I'm in a fragile position that if the one secret that I have that will grant me a market advantage is lost, then I no longer have a business. If someone does not understand this, then I'm sorry, probably is not the best partner for me. Of course, what happened in recent years was that some startups just starting to try to force very complex NDAs. In my experience, when having a very frontal and honest meeting, I never had a problem of signing NDAs, or it might have delayed, let's say, the meeting by one day. If that is the case, then I would consider that. If not, if investors and especially business angels, if they don't understand the importance of it, then I'm sorry, there are other doors to knock, and it for me it does look no, it's not professional, even though most of the time it occurs because even if you don't have any confidential items that you're going to address in the meeting, people force you to that. So if you don't have any confidential things that you're going to address in a meeting, of course, don't sign. You don't need to sign it for a phone call or for an initial meeting. If you're going to further disclose, and this is normally what I say to startups, then when you actually start a longer discussion, okay, and you know that you are being asked to show specific details of your solution, and I cannot do that without signing this. And this is the procedure. If you do that, for me, you are being just cautious, having some caution, and it's well understood by the market. What is not well understood by the market, and I'm talking about the VC market, is that you won't have a phone call if you don't have a NDA signed. And that is probably where the border maybe moved a little bit. I don't know if I've answered your question, Yara.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's the confirmation of our findings. Like, you know, I think this is, we were thinking a lot, what is the, because it's happening as well when collaborating startups with corporates. You know, some startups again, I don't share the presentation, which is a sales presentation, you know, no, if you are not signing an NDA. And this is like making already an extra barrier, you know. So sometimes there is, what is the limit, you know, what is the line? And then we have a startup, for instance, they are not even have nothing of legal, yes, nothing. In 10 years. I mean, like, what?
But yeah, this is the case where, of course, one has to, and let's go to the startup role. One has to consider what is your objective whenever you are setting up a meeting, of course. And if you have an initial meeting and it's, you know what is your presentation, you understand what's the current status of your project. And if your PDF has 3 or 4 information about the market, it doesn't have a picture of the product and only has your contact and email, come on, this is one thing, of course. What sometimes I'm very worried about is that someone starts with that and then they open a new folder and they start showing pictures that they shouldn't show, okay? So the NDA covers that. Then going to a very extreme position as a startup might not be the best way going forward, but nevertheless, I prefer a more cautious approach than, let's say, that example you just said, that you go on years and years and lose track of who have you shown it to, and especially when you're talking about early stage prototypes. It's, come on, it's yeah. Again, one common mistake, Yara, is also some startups only have like one presentation, which is the full thing. Just prepare different levels of presentations, and you know that from this level on, you need to have an NDA and signed, because not only you're really, and I'm focusing this not only on your IP rights, but also on your commercial strategy and things like the sales strategy, pricing, contacts. Okay, this is also important information. It doesn't go on the IP, let's say, folder. But if you want to discuss stuff like this, then please have it signed. Otherwise, you just have to understand that you are going through a big risk. And this is the case, again, Yara, with investors. Sometimes the specific case of investors that you address, sometimes they might be a little bit interested in the technology and all that, but sometimes maybe they are just looking out, or I'm sorry for the word, sniffing for information about other things. So, for instance, one thing can be that I've invested in a competing company, and I would like to understand, you as a startup, what you're doing. Okay. And if that is the case, then the NDA is really important, and maybe not only NDA, but you should consider what is the conversation about. Okay, so this goes for other topics, but I would probably have to discuss that with individual startups. Okay, some things going forward. Yeah, so there's a sentence that I like very much. It shouldn't be called innovation, it should be called we-innovation, because of course R&D is a teamwork. Many people contribute to it. Again, when you are on the startup side, you have to understand that if you have a lot of contributors to your innovation, to your technical developments, again, one has to defend and protect what are your IP rights as a company. And again, all your staff members must have written agreements, okay? And the written agreements can be a little bit more complex when you are, of course, dealing directly with R&D, or can be a little bit simpler if you are just a secretary, but nevertheless, the secretaries handle very important documents, and it's a lot of this staff. Yeah, you know, it's not just stories for cinema, but this sort of infringements occur when your staff moves on, when you have part-time staff. Again, even if it's a part-time staff or just a summer intern, it doesn't matter. They will have access to information, they will have access to knowledge. So it's really important that you have a policy, that you sign it, and people are aware of it. This is basic, yeah, ownership due diligence. Again, even in startups, many companies then will go on common projects, right? European funded project, national funded projects, privately funded projects. One can go forever on consortium agreements. I would not like to dedicate a long time to this, so that we can still discuss other topics. What I would give as a general tip is really to avoid this last minute negotiations, okay? Because you have to submit the proposal, the consortium agreement was not signed yet, please send me ASAP. It tends not to be a good way forward. So of course, the largest the consortium, the clearer the contract has to be. As IPN and as advisor to companies, I've seen many of these agreements being held to the last minute, and it tends to be worse, because then time is pressuring you, and then you don't want to lose the opportunity or the contract, and one has to be careful about this. So please, when invited to any consortium, when thinking of this has to be on the table from day one, okay? It's something that can be dealt really fast, or if you consider that the whole consortium probably is never going to get to an agreement, maybe it's time that you just split parts and be thinking of other partners. You can have a great technical partner, but if one doesn't have a contract, you're left exposed, okay? Then we go, of course, to the specific patent application. Again, the first sentence says it all. I don't know, Yara, if you agree with me. One has to consider
yes, I am agreeing.
So having a patent, I must say, of course, is important. It's sexy as a startup, of course, to have your business, your exclusivity rights protected. It's good, but one should consider the business decision of it. So as they are expensive, due not only to the preparation, but then to the actual maintaining of the patent, one has to consider the long-term effect on this. Of course, some strategies can be applied. The PCT, so the national phase, should be used quite smartly. So sometimes you can have a 1-year advantage, of course, to file your national patent, and then just going for the other phases, having the pre-date as your right. But be aware, and I don't know all of the companies that have the full awareness on how much a patent is, how much does it cost to file and how much does it cost to maintain. Okay, so of course the general rules should be, you should extend your patent European wise, US, main markets, Brazil, Canada, Japan. But if you go further and further, the more countries you add, of course, the higher costs you incur. Understand where are your competitors, understand where can be your future business, so you can expand it. But one thing I'm not a patent attorney, of course, I'm not I don't need to defend their professional, but it can be one of the best investments is to understand who are the best patent attorneys within your field of work. Have some consultations on it, have some feedback from previous patent applicants in your area, and understand how this patent attorney can help you write the patent application. Because again, doing the claims is both a technical job, but it's also a legal job, and you may be good on one side, but having an experienced pair of eyes looking at the application is critical. Because again, many applications fail due to how badly they were written, and once again, then you just lose it and it's gone. So the opportunity might be lost. One of the most important documents that one company might have in the early days is, again, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the freedom to operate analysis. So one can consider a patent search and understanding where are the rights. So if we had a map where they are defended and where in which areas you still can operate without infringing. Okay, so this also goes to the question that someone asked me a while ago. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm in patent status, but at least how can I operate and create products and do businesses without infringing? So this is really a great analysis. And of course, one of the outcomes of the patent application is the search report of the National Patent Office, and they will give you the patent search report. And for instance, for most investors, this is almost as important as your own patent, because it will give you an overview of the similar patents that are out there. How do you, if you have some borders infringing and so on. So this is actually a powerful tool. So once again, one has to consider not only the cost of the patent, but what are you getting in return. Okay, and one should not overlook the importance of having this patent search report, and of course on the other side, the freedom to operate analysis that you can have by constantly doing this patent search. So again, other strategies besides just the right itself. Going back to the how can I defend my invention, if I'm, let's say, in ICT. Trademark actually is one of the things that I think a lot of companies overlook. And one thing is, of course, when you, creating a trademark has more commercial effects, let's say, but I think it has also a very important long-term effect, is that the fact that you coined, you were able to own this trademark, sets you up. If you are, let's say you were just saying that you were in sensors and IoT, so to have a strong trademark within that field is one asset that one should not consider as a weak asset. I consider it a very strong asset, because the fact that you are the company that registered that trademark, you are on that field. So it's very interesting that one should combine it. Okay, and sometimes when you create a new device, a new technology, just create a brand and a name for it and register it as a trademark. This is one very important piece of advice that again, startups in the rush of going to the market don't take in consideration. But how can I create my own brand as a whole that is a trademark, some specific technology that I hold, and my position on the market. So this is being as an integrated strategy. I think it works very well, and we have several examples of companies that have done that strategy. Then, of course, other secondary steps that you can take. Always mention copyright in all the manual and additional materials that you produce over your product and technology. This is very important to have it as a procedure, and most of the people overlook this as well. So this is also complementary, and I think you should take care of this. Again, errors to be avoided, and of course I will not discuss in concrete the patent costs, and I don't want to go over my time, but one of the actual problems that we sometimes, when you search the patents, you understand is okay, that patent has been there for 4 or 5 years, but then they stop paying it, and the protection stops, right? If you don't pay the fees, and sometimes it is the case because it does no longer compensate, or the company went broke, or whatever the cause is. But we also had cases of companies that just forgot about it, and it's very tricky if you really delay it. So one thing is to really have someone responsible for your IP management. Even if you are in a smaller structure, this has to be someone's task and assignment. And as the company grows, maybe that assignment shifts to someone else. Of course, you might not have the opportunity to set up this chief IP officer when you are a smaller company, but this task needs to have an owner, okay? And this has to be very clear who has this responsibility, who needs to look for these matters, to budget them every year, okay? Because sometimes someone just forgets to put it on the budget and they go away. And of course, you also need to maintain this relations with the patent attorneys that you're working with the IP office, national office, and of course, if you're coming after the university, with the TTOs and all that. So this is just don't forget that someone has to wear this hat, and that has to have this role in the organization. And of course, the last but not least important is okay, I have my patent, I have my right, I have my trademark. So what can I actually be doing in it? And if they violate us, how can I enforce? Of course, this has once again, being constantly on the search and having your radar on is of course one of the ways to detect potential infringements. And if you don't follow up, if you don't look for it, it's no good. So again, you have to have and also an infringement strategy, and you can easily draft that with your IP lawyer, because straight away, if you are a company and you receive a letter from another company to say, sorry, you're using my trademark, stop using this straight away, this is the penalty we've defined. So it's not something to be, it's something that's very scary the first time I saw one, but it happens. You know, a lot of lawsuits, and it's straight away, it's very fast. Most of the legal systems in Europe defend this as a straightforward process, so it's actually much more common that sometimes people think. So it's there for you to use it. Of course, the other way, as we discussed with TTOs, is if I'm a company and I have generated a valuable IP, okay, how can I upsell it? How can I license it? There are numerous ways of licensing technology. Of course, exclusivity rights an exclusive license have to be very well considered, given the geography, given the area, but they are there for the grab, and having a smart strategy can grant you very interesting revenues to keep up with your company. So I think, yeah, Samuel, I said 1 hour and a half, and I actually was on the spot.
So, perfect timing.
So I of course I had to rush a little bit, so now I just wanted to open the floor to specific questions, some comments that you might have, and some themes that maybe just if someone wants to address a question and they haven't introduced themselves, so please just introduce yourself so I can just understand your background a little bit better.
Yeah, please, anyone, feel free to take the opportunity.
If not, I can go on forever talking about startups.
No, I think it was good that we sort of opened the floor to questions throughout the presentation. It made it a lot more dynamic. It gave you some time to breathe also, so it was a good approach. But yeah.
My main topic, of course, I was not so much dedicated to the, let's say, the first topic on how to set up TTOs and that. So then, if I'm more than happy to keep on the discussions with the participants on that. How I cannot disclose some examples on a presentation like this, but we can discuss specific rules and contracts that you have in place, and not being, again, having a legal background. I'm an economist as a background, but I have the experience of everyday negotiations. That's my contribution.
Hi, sorry, it's Antonio Scarmet again. I mean,
yeah, Antonio.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I think at least for the last part for me it was quite more clear. No, the issue you mentioned about the NDA, and I mean all these aspects regarding the IPs, etc. But I mean, as you were mentioning regarding your first part, I was more on the ways to define the strategy for the technology transfer, for example. I mean, it's something. It's a typical issue that it is difficult in many cases to understand. In many cases, depending obviously, but to clarify what could be the better strategy in the sense. No, so what could be the long-term strategy regarding the transfer? In some cases, as you said, maybe just based on royalties, it could be something that if we know that we are going to have a return very quickly, I mean, it will help. In other case, it is maybe the ways to just give it and receive some money from the beginning and forgot about it. So I mean, that's it. But also I think more and more now there's another kind of solution that is more like a joint ventures or provided as a service, basically the solution in that sense. So basically, I mean, it is not to totally give the result to the third party, yes, but also to try to, in some way, agree on some kind of mutual collaboration. That in some case could be okay. You just tune it, and I provide you the baseline, no, for this kind
Antonio, that's pretty much the thanks for the question. So let's go. So that we have two typical scenarios, right? You have either a university or research centers on the first scenario, then you have, for instance, an operating company in the second scenario. Of course, for universities and the long-term strategy, for me, what I find that works is if you have a very clear and open policy regarding that the promoters and the inventors within the university can move forward with projects that they were working on, that they are co-inventors. This for me should be the let's say the backbone of the policy. Of course, when you are considering this, it's almost, I would say, not impossible, but it's not feasible to have upfront payments and having this sort of agreement, because then you're not fostering, you're just saying, get me 1 million euros and you can move forward with your project, okay? The long-term approach is also one that the university should, again, monitor and foster, okay? Of course, royalty deals have many tricky parts, but you have other clauses that you have to consider, like the continuation of development, the co-development, how can that be set up, and so on. And that I believe that should be, on one hand, very clear. So you as a university staff or as an R&D staff, you understand how you can move forward if you want to progress with the spin-off. But again, like Yara said, there's a cost to knowledge, okay? There's a cost to knowledge. One should consider, okay, but I fully invented this all came out of my head. And again, the simple answer to that, of course, but I set up the university, I set up your lab, I set up a lot of stuff. Again, if it is clear, I think it's understandable in 90% of the cases. Company-wise, of course, when you are a little strapped in the early days with cash, of course, the upfront payment seems very, very interesting, and you just let it go, and that's it. Of course, if you have a more longer-term strategy in terms of let's keep some co-development options, let's keep some sharing of rights options, that can be interesting, especially when you are dealing as a startup with larger companies. Larger corporates tend not to like this. They prefer to have it as a closed package, right? Simpler to negotiate. But one should always put that on the table, okay? And that's my main let's say negotiating tip. If I'm a startup and I'm negotiating with a larger corporate, you have sometimes the temptation to accept straight away the let's say the conditions or the relation that the larger corporate is offering you. Don't be shy. Let's say you can always add some terms to the negotiation. Okay, even if you have less bargain power. Okay, it is possible, and I do advise you to do that. There are some cases, of course, where you don't succeed at, and you straight away give away all the rights. Nevertheless, you can. I showed some options that you can use, and there are ways to negotiate always as a startup. I don't know if I addressed the topic.
Yeah. Yes. No, I mean, I just wanted to also to know your position there and what is your vision there. Yeah. Thanks.
Of course, there is never a let's say a perfect negotiation table, right? Because you understand that the previous conditions and the bargaining power is different. What I believe is that even if you are a startup, when negotiating with larger companies, you cannot give away easily what is so hard-earned sometimes effort, and you have to understand your right value. And this sometimes is the case that you should set up negotiations that more than one at the same time. You can do that again if you have specific NDA to that, it helps. Again, don't be shy when negotiating.
I have one case, Jorge, I think from Aachen in Germany.
Yes.
So the RWTH Aachen, they don't care about the IP. So the strategy they have is money. They say, okay, you pay us because we have to research and we need money to research.
Yeah.
So companies, apparently they care about the IP.
Contract driven, let's say.
Exactly. So it works well. They have a lot of money coming from collaboration with corporates.
Yeah. Again, yeah. That is an interesting approach, and that is one that I see a lot of private companies doing. Okay, I'm just the last month I have a company setting up here in my incubator that their purpose is actually to do dedicated R&D in close contracts, very straightforward terms. I believe that for a university, this is probably hard to first enforce. Second, to go around what is your legal obligation as a public university in some cases, right? Because you are the recipient of public money, so you have some obligations due to that. I do understand that more in a pure private practice. In the common, let's say, public funded universities, maybe a little bit more difficult to do. Again, in other countries, maybe possible, but it is a more attacking strategy, I must say.
Yeah, they are very. I think they are the few of universities that are doing this.
This direct, but again, it is contract-based research. Yeah, it's done as we say. It's the black box model, right? You just get the.
Yeah, they have public research, funding research, so they have both. No?
Yeah, but the contract-based research is an option for of course for universities. You have to be very attentive of the resources you use right, because again you have obligations under at least grant schemes and public schemes that you have to consider. But again, it's one of the options that I indicated. And on the private sector, you're of course free to do it. It has let's say you can have a very short-term gain. You don't have the long-term gain, but if in startups is the case that you say if you have a very large pipeline of deal flow coming in, it's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, maybe one last question, since we're almost reaching 1 hour and 45. It's been a very good discussion. So any other questions from the audience? No. Maybe George, one big final recommendation you have to give to our audience today before we close the session?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to thank you for your time and for the invitation. It was a pleasure to be here. This is actually being able to support startups is I must say probably I'm lucky to be in this position. One thing that I truly advise you, either as R&D institution or as a company or a startup, is have these issues have to be even if they don't have an operational priority, okay, because probably your operation runs around a lot of things, they have to have a very well structured frame that everyone understands and it's clear. Sometimes these issues may be tricky, may be debatable, do debate them, but when you establish a policy, be very clear about it and communicate it among your organization and in a very straightforward way. What I don't like to see is just one of the cases that we discussed here. So we have companies that have been running for years and no one has ever thought about IP protection and are just running loose, let's say. This for me makes absolutely no sense, especially when you're talking about tech startups and R&D development activities. So be clear on it. It's not that complicated to set up a policy. It's not that complicated to have a set of rules, a set of standard documents that anyone can have access and are accessible to everyone. And that's how you should run it and how you should be one of the pillars of your institution or company.
Fantastic. Great. So, George, again, thank you very much for your availability. It was definitely a very interesting session. I think I personally learned a lot. I'm sure everyone else was able to extract something as well. To everyone that joined, thank you also for your availability. I hope this was useful.
Sam, can I jump in real fast at the end here?
Yes, sorry.
So, yeah, I was just letting this thing go. I just wanted to kind of jump in at the end. So I'm Sa Holsinger. I'm the coordinator of the EOSC Digital Innovation Hub. So I just wanted to kind of jump in and say at the end here, thanks for the webinar. I thought the content was really extremely interesting and useful. And I think especially for the activity that we're carrying out, it's quite funny that it was called technology transfer webinar, but really what it was a knowledge transfer webinar, because and I think that's really the point is sometimes we're providing services and sometimes we're exchanging knowledge. So, and then I think even for the people that are in the technology transfer space, sometimes it's just really nice to see everything kind of laid out, organized, all of the kind of individual topics that you kind of have to cover and just kind of provide a structure to the topic that we can kind of reuse moving forward. So from my point of view, thank you very much for delivering this, and I hope everybody else in our community, it seems like from all of the messages they enjoyed it as well. So yeah, I just wanted to jump in at the end.
No, thanks for the words. Of course, it's hard to share specific templates or models, but they can be discussed, and you can have probably access to very good examples within your more local community. Nevertheless, there are excellent sources for this sort of documents and policies that you can start with, and this is a backbone that.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the classic rabbit holes. So I mean, every topic you can go down certain rabbit holes depending on what area you want to do a more deep dive in. So I mean, that's definitely normal. So this kind of gives you the outlook of which area and which topic would you like to kind of do a deeper dive in moving forward. So yeah, 100%.
Okay, thanks a lot for your work.
All right. Thanks, Sai. Also, again, George, thank you very much to everyone. Thank you very much. And I hope to see everyone soon in an upcoming webinar on other topics. So have a good afternoon and take care.